After helping dozens of entrepreneurs launch their podcasts, I can tell you the exact naming mistakes that tank their podcast before the show even launches. In this video, I'm going to cover how to name your podcast. This is the exact naming framework we use with our clients at Podfox Media, plus the legal and business steps that most podcasters skip. My name's Sarah Heater, and I am the CEO of Podfox Media. We help small businesses launch, grow, and monetize podcasts in order to expand their audience, establish their expertise, and make more money online. So there's 3 steps to figuring out the name for your podcast, and then we're going to get into what you should do once you think of a name that you like. So first of all, we're going to go with strategy over creativity. Keywords and searchability must come first. Clear beats clever every single time. So what that means is you might like the name of the podcast, but if no one can find it or no one knows what it means, what are you even doing? You need to make sure that it's really clear what the podcast is about, who it's for, what they're going to get out of it, and your differentiating factor, what sets you apart, what's going to make that podcast pop off on the search engine results page when somebody's searching for a show to listen to. When we think about who is your audience, we want to know, is this immediately obvious? So when somebody sees it in the search results, does it immediately become clear if that show is for them or what the heck it's for? If it's not, they're just not going to click on it, and you're going to lose all of that organic traffic. The only people who are going to be finding your show are people you're directly marketing it to. That's important, and we'll talk a lot on this channel about marketing in other videos, but we also want to make sure we're capitalizing on that organic traffic. When it comes to SEO, the most important thing, this is number 2, the most important thing is the first word of your title. Now, I wish I had known this when I named my podcast, because I didn't know that this was the case. So many people start their podcasts with the word "the," or they start their podcast with the word "podcast" or something like that. And that's just not going to be search friendly. So we want to think of that first word as the beginning of a keyword string that's going to be your best, most searchable part of your podcast. So for example, if you're a social media manager, then you want the first 3 words to be social media manager, something, right? That's what we want to do, because we want to make sure we're getting that even a longer tail keyword there. So you want to choose this first word based on what your ideal listener is searching for. Are they searching for SEO? Are they searching for AI? Are they searching for marketing tips? What is it that they're looking for that your show offers? That's what we want to make sure is the first word or the first few words in a string together. So for example, we could look at the Business Growth Podcast versus The Sarah Show. Which one is going to be clearer, and also which one is going to capitalize more on that search engine optimization? Okay, part 3 in our framework for naming a podcast is to consider whether or not you should include your own name in the name of your podcast. So it might be tempting for me, Sarah Heater, to name my podcast The Sarah Heater Show. But the reality is that the only people who are searching for me are probably myself and my team when they're checking my SEO, right? Most people are not Google searching me. They're Google searching what I have to offer. So then what we want to consider is, why are so many people naming podcasts after themselves? And here's the thing. Ego is definitely part of it, but also there are examples where this makes sense. Now, Amy Porterfield, who is a huge business coach, and she has been podcasting for a very long time. She recently updated the branding of her podcast at the time of recording this video. She recently updated from Online Marketing Made Easy, which it has been called that for like 10 years, and she updated the show to the Amy Porterfield Show. That's cool if you're Amy Porterfield, because honestly, that's going to capitalize better for her, for people who are specifically looking for her, than for people who are just generally looking for, like, how do I start or grow a business? But that's not true for most of us, because for most of us, people are not searching the internet looking for us, not like they are for Amy Porterfield. Does your name actually capitalize on SEO, or are there other terms that you could use that would better capture that organic traffic? And does it communicate your differentiating factor? If people don't know who you are or what you do already, if you aren't already established, that's not going to help. But what if you're medium famous? What if there are people who are specifically searching for you in your industry, but not at the Amy Porterfield level? This is where I would say it works best to have a different podcast title, then put a colon, and then put a subtitle, and that is a place where you can put your name. Okay, so what do you do next? Once you think of a name, and it kind of passes all the checks that we just talked about in the framework for searchability and for your differentiating factor, and to pop off that search results page, then what do you do next? Because it's not that simple. We still need to make sure that that name is available. So the very first thing you want to do is check the podcast apps for the exact name you've thought of and see if somebody else thought of it first. Does it exist? And because the SEO isn't always great in those podcast apps, depending on what the name of the show is that you've thought of, you also want to Google search for it. Google search the name that you've thought of plus the word podcast and see if anything comes up. Sometimes people are already in the process of launching, but the show isn't out yet. Sometimes you'll find people who have a show that they call a podcast, but it's only on YouTube, so it's not in the podcast apps. The next thing that you want to do is check the domain availability. Now, I'm talking about your podcastname.com. We specifically want to search to see if that domain is available or if it's taken. And if it's taken, what is it taken by? Sometimes it's just a parking lot and it's not actually being used. Sometimes it's a totally irrelevant, totally different brand. You're going to have to make your own best assessment and best judgment of whether or not that's something you want to move forward with if the domain already exists for another brand or another company, especially in a totally different industry, because that's going to cause some brand confusion. And as your show grows, you want to be able to have a really strong, solid brand footprint. And if there's another thing out there that sounds just like it, but it's a completely different industry, that's going to be a little confusing. Similarly, we want to check the social media handles. So you want to check all of the major platforms, even if you're not planning on using them. So check Instagram, check Facebook, check Pinterest, check LinkedIn, check TikTok, check all of the places where people are hanging out online and see if that handle is available there. And if it's taken, what is it taken by? You don't want someone to search for the name you thought of super cleverly and what they land on is like some totally irrelevant lifestyle brand that does not match your branding or your core values. Okay, so once we've determined whether or not this name that you've thought of already has an internet footprint or a podcast attached, let's say you get that far and it's not taken and you feel really good about this. There is one more legal step that you really want to make sure that you check, and that is the US trademark database. Now, it's a totally free search engine, and even if you're not based in the US has a huge internet presence, so we still want to check just to see. And you want to check all different kind of versions of your name and all the different kind of ways to spell it or write it, just again to see whose toes you might be stepping on, and also what kind of brand confusion might exist out there. Now, if you don't know anything about trademarks, don't worry. I'm not a lawyer, but I've done a couple of trademarks of my own, and I also help people with naming podcasts all the time, every day. When we're looking at the trademark database, if you find one, a trademark for the name that you came up with, but it's not a podcast and it's not for anything content creation related or anything remotely related to your industry, let's say you're doing a business coaching podcast and you find the same name, but it's trademarked for a shoe company or a face wash, then those are considered different categories, which technically, according to the Patent and Trademark Office, is okay. But you still have to question yourself, is that going to cause brand confusion? Somebody does hear about my podcast and they search for it and they find a shoe company. Is that what I want to happen? So it's not a legal problem per se, but it is good to know. Also, what happens if that shoe company decides they want to start a podcast? It would be really easy for them to make the case that they had the name first and that they should be able to expand their trademark into a new category. You just don't want any legal trouble. So making sure that what you have is unique also totally matters. Now you've thought of a name, it meets all of the framework criteria, and you feel really good about it. You search the internet and you see that it is yours for the taking. What do you do next? Here's the steps that you should take to secure this podcast name. Number 1, buy the domain at .com. Even if you don't plan to start a website, that's okay. You should still secure it. That means no one else can take it, and that's really important. So go ahead and just buy it, even if you just parking lot it. Number 2, same kind of thing, secure those social media handles. You don't have to have an account on every social media platform that you're actually actively using, but you want to make sure no one takes it from you. Here's a great example of how this can show up. When someone's running for office and they don't have their domain secured, then somebody else who is just part of the general public, who maybe doesn't like them very much, swoops up that domain, swoops up that trademark, swoops up those social media handles, and ransacks them. And that is terrible for that person's campaign, right? This is a thing that genuinely happens. So when you want to start a podcast and you've thought of a name and the social media handles and the domain.com are available, take them. Take them. We want to reserve them for you, secure them for you so that you own them. Here's some bonus points for managing the name of your podcast well. Number 1, go ahead and secure that trademark too. It's just going to protect you. If anybody else were to start a podcast with the same name, especially if they've already got a bigger audience, you want to make sure you're not the one who has to turn around and rebrand. You've got that protection in place. So go ahead and register for your trademark. Now, with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, if you file with them directly at the time of recording this, that price is $350 per trademark, per category classification, right? So if you want to classify it as a podcast, that's 1. If you want to classify it also for merchandise, for clothing and apparel, that's 2, right? So you'd pay $350 for each class that you want to go ahead and trademark in. I am not a lawyer. Let me stress this to you. I am not a lawyer, but there's plenty of lawyers out there who can help you, and services that will help you with filing your trademark for an extra fee in addition to that $350 per class. Then here's the other way you can get bonus points. Go ahead and set up a business entity in your state. Now, that could look like a sole proprietorship. It could look like an LLC. If you have a co-host, it's going to be a partnership, or again, it could be an LLC with 2 owners. The reason why is because that way you can start tracking your expenses as well as hopefully your income made as a result of the podcast. Even if you feel like you are miles away from being able to secure sponsorships or any other kind of revenue generating activities as a direct result of the podcast, this ensures that you can file those with the government. So you'll want to go ahead and do a business entity setup that's just going to protect you, and it's going to keep everything separate, and it's also going to help with all of those other pieces because they all go together. So if you want to use a podcast for business, treat it like a business asset. Here's how we're wrapping up. Your podcast name is your first strategic marketing decision when it comes to starting your show. We want to put strategy first, check the availability, and then protect the brand. If you want help with the strategy behind launching your podcast, we offer a 100% free 90-minute private launch strategy session with anybody thinking of starting a show. You can sign up for your time at launchmyshow.com. Again, no purchase necessary, 100% free. We just believe more people should use their voice because your voice matters. So come and hang out with us for 90 minutes and let's talk about what your show is going to look like, and we can help you with the heavy lifting on naming that podcast too. All right, all the information is going to be in the description box below. Make sure that you follow and subscribe for more tips on launching, growing, and monetizing your podcast. See you soon.